I was a boy, we didn't have air conditioning. The summers, they were long and hot, and you slept with the windows open and a fan on. Then my father put in our first window units. He had a big one downstairs and another upstairs where my older sister slept, and a small one in his and my mother's room. And we closed off the formal rooms so the cool air went where we actually lived. Now, after a day out in the heat, I used to sit at the bottom of those stairs just to feel the cold air spilling down the steps. And I remember those days well, and it was pretty miserable. But that was what we were used to. Now, I've been cooling southern houses ever since, and my house has central air. But I keep a set of window units in the storage shed just in case the grid goes down. And here in Louisiana, when a hurricane comes through, it can knock out the power for days. So let me save you some money and some frustration by telling you the only window units that I'd buy and how to size them correctly, because that's where people have the most trouble when they need to buy a window unit. So let's get to it. Before I tell you which units to buy, I need to show you how to size one. This is where most people mess up, and it's the difference between a unit that cools your room and one that just runs up your power bill for nothing. And it's simpler than you think. Here's the method that I was taught, and you can do it standing in the room. You measure the length and the width in feet. You multiply them together, and that's your square footage. Then multiply that number by 20. That's roughly how many BTUs you're going to need. Now, length times width times 20. Use a calculator if you have to, but that will give you a very good idea of the size to look for. Now, let me give you two examples. A bedroom that's 12 by 12 is 144 square feet. 20 times is a little under 3,000. The math comes to about 3,000 BTU. But window units don't really come in sizes smaller than 5,000. So 5,000 is going to be your unit. And the 6,000 is close enough for any small room. And that's going to be the size that I pick. A living room that's 20 by 20 is 400 square feet. Times 20 is going to be 8,000. So you look at about 10,000 BTU unit for that room. Now, one thing to know before you shop, window units come in standard sizes: 5,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, and up from there. Your measurement will rarely land exactly on one of those, and that's fine. Do the math, then round up to the near size that's actually made. Round up, not down. An undersized unit runs constantly and never quite cools the room, and going up a step larger than the math is only a small penalty, as long as you don't overdo it. And don't go looking for the odd sizes, the in-between sizes. There's no real 3,000, 7,500 BTU window unit. 5,000 is the smallest thing made, so any small bedroom or office just takes the 5,000. You don't even need to measure. And most medium rooms land on the 8,000. So measure, round up to the next real size, and you're done. A few things will raise that number. If it's a kitchen, add 4,000 BTU to whatever you calculated, since the stove and the refrigerator are constantly throwing off heat. And that's the adjustment that most people don't know about. If the room gets heavy afternoon sun, you want to add about 10%. If it's in a shaded area, you may subtract 10%. And if more than two people are usually in the room at the same time, add 600 BTU per additional person and round up, since people give off heat also. One more, and this is where the age of your house matters. Homes down here in the South weren't commonly insulated until about the 1950s, and it wasn't required until in the mid-1960s. So if you're in an older house that was never insulated, always size up. The cool air leaks right back out, and the unit works harder to keep up. In a newer, well-sealed house, you can stay right on the number. It may be the same size room and the same climate, but the older, leaky house needs more cooling capacity. Now, when I built my house, I went to my utility company, and they had a program, and they came out and inspected and made sure that we built it up to their standards, and it's worked out very well. Here's one that catches people: the ceiling height. The 20 per square foot rule assumes a standard 8-foot ceiling, but cooling isn't really about floor space. It's about the volume of air inside the room. And a tall room holds a lot more of it overhead. And I'll show you what I mean. I cool a shop space for my wife with a 16-foot ceiling. On a humid day, you can watch a line form about 8 feet up in the air. The cool air settles down low where the work's happening, and the warm, humid air stays up in the top of the building. And when the conditions are just right, there clouds form there. There's a little cloud layer there. It freaked her out one day. She said, "Come look! I have clouds in my shop." And when conditions are right, a small cloud forms at that boundary where those two meet. Now, the reason those layers hold is that the air is still. If I ran a ceiling fan in there, it would mix everything together and break that line, which is also why you'd then be cooling the whole volume, not just the part where you're standing. But left alone, that's the cooled air doing exactly what it should, cooling the space you occupy and leaving the dead air up high alone. It's also why in a room with tall or vaulted ceilings, floor space alone is going to mislead you. So with high ceilings, add 10 or 15%, or step up to the next size. Otherwise, you're asking a small unit to cool a large volume of air, and it will run constantly trying to. Now, the mistake nearly everyone makes, and I want you to hear this real clear, do not buy the biggest unit you can afford thinking you're going to do yourself a favor, because it's not better. An oversized unit cools the room so quickly that it cycles on and off, and it never runs long enough to pull humidity out of the air. You're going to end up with a room that's cool and clammy, and a unit that short cycles on and off wears itself out early. So size it correctly, not too large. A right-sized unit that runs steadily will outperform an oversized one that short cycles. Now, a lot of you will ask the same thing. What if I want to cool more than one room? And here's the honest answer, and I'll use my own house to explain it, because it's the same question I had to work through. And when the unit cools the room it's in first, and it will push some of that cool air into the next room, but only if there's a path. Open the entryways, doors left open, rooms that flow into each other. I grew up with a large unit that cooled half our downstairs that way. But close the doors or ask it to reach down the hall or around the corner, and it stops at the walls. It only cools as far as the air can freely move. If the rooms are open to each other, you can size for it. Take the full square footage of the room the unit's in and add about half the square footage of the open room beside it. Half, because that second room only gets the overflow. Then multiply by 20 as usual. A 300 square foot living room open to a 150 square foot dining room is 300 plus half the dining room, 75. So 375 square feet times 20, about 8,000 BTU. Understand the trade-off. You're running a larger unit in the main room than it needs. So it short cycles. It cools that room fast, but doesn't run long enough to pull the humidity out. So it feels cold and a little clammy. Meanwhile, the far room only gets just enough to get by. Every house is going to be laid out differently, so treat that as an estimate, not a guarantee. But if you're trying to cool 3 or 4 separate rooms with the doors closed, one unit is the wrong tool. No matter how large it is, it's not going to push cold air through walls. For that, you put a correctly sized unit in each room where people actually are. Large room, large unit. Small room, small unit. Now here's where I do it differently, and I want to explain why, because it's the whole reason I'm making this video. My window units aren't my everyday cooling. They're my backup for when a storm knocks out the electricity. And for that purpose, I did something that wouldn't work in everyday use. I bought the same size units for each end of my house. Even though the rooms aren't the same size, when I'm running on a generator during an outage, what matters most is being able to pull a unit from one room I'm not using and drop it into one that I need it in if it goes out on me. They use the same brackets, the same parts. I gave up ideal room by room sizing to get that flexibility. And that's the right trade-off for some storm backups. So if one goes out, we can all move into the most convenient end of the house and close off that other section. They aren't meant to cool or heat properly. They're
They're only meant to keep the interior at a reasonable, comfortable temperature until the electricity comes back on. But if you're just cooling your house day to day, and don't copy me on that, size each room for what it is. Now, plenty of people cool and heat their whole home with window units, and there's nothing wrong with that. For an older house with no ductwork, a rental, or a tight budget, they're a sensible way to go. Just know the tipping point. Once you're buying and running enough units to cover the whole house, the cost starts to approach a permanent system. At that point, it's worth at least pricing out central air or mini split and seeing which one makes more sense to you. But that's a different category and a different budget and a different video. Today we're talking about window units. The ones you can buy this weekend, install yourself, and rely on, whether they're your whole system or your backup when the power goes out. So let me give you the three that I'd buy, not by brand, but by what you need. A simple, cheap one, a quiet, efficient one, and a heavy-duty one for a large room. Match the size to your room using the rule I just gave you, and buy the one that fits your situation. One note on prices before I start. I'm giving you these as of early August 2026, and window unit prices move with the season. They're highest right now in the heat of the summer and cheaper come fall. So treat these as a ballpark figure and check the current price at the link in the description. And honestly, if you can stand the wait, you'll pay less in a month or two. I'd rather tell you that than sell you a unit at the top of the market. If all you want is to cool a room and spend as little as possible, buy an LG. Now, some of you have watched my washer videos and noticed LG isn't usually who I send people to. That's fair, but let me be clear about this and why. Because it's not what you think. LG makes a perfectly reliable washing machine, and they rate well. I just tend to steer folks toward simpler commercial style machines that a person can service and keep running for 20 years. And LG washers are built more complicated than that. It's not that LG builds junk, it's a different priority. And when it comes to window air conditioners, LG earns its spot on merit. Now, they're basic box units with the simple controls, no inverter and no app, do exactly one job, and they do it well. This is the pick that came up again and again in the testing that I looked at. Tech Gear Lab, after running 15 units through side-by-side lab tests, called the LG the best simple budget air conditioner for most people. Consumer Reports rates LG at the top of the pack for reliability. So this isn't just my opinion, it's what the people who test these things for a living keep coming up with. The model is the LW6017R. It's 6,000 BTU, good for a bedroom or office, up to about 250 square feet, and it runs around $250. There's nothing fancy about it, and that's the whole point. It's the unit you buy, put in the window, and forget about it. And if it ever quits on you, you're not out much to replace it, which matters because I'm going to explain later, nobody's really repairing these things anyway. One thing this unit won't do is heat. It only cools. If you need heat too, hold that thought, and we'll come back to it at the end. If you can spend a little more, this is the one that I'd put in most rooms. The Midea U-shaped inverter. It's the quietest window unit anyone has tested, and the reason is its shape. The U puts the compressor outside the glass, so the window itself sits between you and the noisy part, and it runs at about 32 decibels, which is about as quiet as these things get. A testing site called Ratings, and it's Ratings without the A, calls it the best window air conditioner that they've tested. Tech Gear Lab makes it their top pick. The inverter runs it more efficiently, so it's easier on your power bill, and because of that U-shape, you can still open and close your window with the unit installed. The 8,000 BTU model runs around $350, a bit more than the 10 and 12,000 BTU models. So size it to your room. The model number is MAW08V1QWT. One thing worth mentioning, these had a recall last year for a drainage issue that could cause water to pool and mold to grow. Midea corrected it, and every unit sold since is now a fixed version. When a company recalls something, they fix the line before they ship anymore. So a new one that you buy today is probably sound. I'd have no hesitation putting one in my own house. For a large living room or an open space, you need more muscle, and the pick there is the LG dual inverter LW1517IVSM. That's 14,000 BTU, enough to cool a large room up to about 800 square feet, and it runs on a standard wall outlet. Figure around $500. The tested hub rates it the strongest all-around unit in its size, and the inverter keeps it efficient even at that capacity. Here's a warning that'll save you money. If you think you need to go bigger than this, the 18,000 BTU units and up, and most of those require a dedicated 240 volt circuit, the same kind of outlet as your electric dryer. Most homes don't have that kind of outlet where the window unit goes, so you'll have to pay an electrician to run one. So unless your space is genuinely huge, this 14,000 BTU LG is the sweet spot, and it cools nearly any room in a typical house. It plugs into a wall socket like everything else does. Now, before you buy any of these, one practical thing people forget to check whether the unit actually fits in your window. These are all made for a standard double hung window. That's the kind that slides up and down. Measure your window's width before you order, because each of these lists the window sizes that it's going to fit. And a larger unit needs a wider opening. If you've got casement windows, that's the kind that crank open sideways, and then a regular box unit's not going to work here at all, and you're going to need a special casement unit made for that. And here's one that catches people. You cannot take a regular window unit and push it into a hole in the wall. A window unit vents heat out the back and the sides. If you bury those side vents in a wall, it can't shed the heat, and it'll overheat and die. If you want one in a wall, you buy a through the wall unit that vents only out the back and set it in a proper wall sleeve. Now, some units are rated for both window and wall, and it'll say so on the box, but don't assume that it will. Check that it's a wall rated before you cut a hole, or you're going to ruin a brand new air conditioner. Now, some of you are wondering about the units that also heat. Those are the window heat pumps. Those are different machines with their own rules. A true heat pump stops heating once it gets cold enough outside. So in a colder climate, you need one with a backup heater coil to get through a hard freeze. There's more to sorting that out than I can cover here without running an hour long. So if there's interest, I'll make a separate video on window heat pumps, like which ones actually heat when it's cold and which ones have backup coils, and you should buy one. Let me know in the comments if you want me to make a video on this. Now let me tell you something about these units that nobody selling them will, and it's the reason I told you to buy the simple one and not cry over replacing it. Nobody repairs window units. Nobody. I can't find anybody around here that repairs them. Maybe there are some, I don't know, and I'd be surprised if you can find a shop in your town that does. Service people for window units are scarce to non-existent. The parts are hard to get. They're specific to each model, and by the time you paid somebody to diagnose it and hunt down a part, you spent more than a new unit cost. So the whole business runs on replacement, not repair. When one dies, it goes to the scrapyard and you buy another. That's just the reality of these machines, and it's why price and simplicity matter more here than they would on something you'd actually fix. And let me give you an example from my own place. I had a small window heat pump in my wife's craft shop, and I was cleaning it by pressure washing the coils to get the dirt out. Now I wasn't thinking, and the spray from that wand caught the fan and spun it up. And before I could stop it, the wand hit a blade and snapped it right off. Now, a fan's not going to run with the blade missing because it's out of balance. It'll shake itself apart. So now I need a new fan blade. I go to take the thing apart to replace it, and the screws holding the shroud on are rusted solid and the head strip out. Now I'm into a machine I can't get open, chasing a blade I'm not sure I can even find over a unit that wasn't expensive to begin with. So I did what everybody ends up doing. I gave up. I bought another one just like it so I could use the same case that was already installed, and I moved on. And I fix appliances for a living. So if a repairman with a full shop of tools end up just buying a new one, that's your answer too. Don't spend big money on a window unit expecting to nurse it along for 15 years. Buy a good simple one, take care of it, and when it finally quits, replace it. That's not being lazy, that's just how these things are built and how the whole thing works. If it's going to cost more than half the cost of a new one to repair, buy a new one. which is one more reason I like buying the same model for more than one room as I do. When one gives out, I'm not having to match brackets or windows. I already know it fits, and I can swap the good one from a room I'm not using and put the dead one on my list to replace. If all you want is to cool a room without spending much, get the LG, the LW6017R. It's around $250, and it'll do a bedroom and an office just fine. If you want the one I'd put in most rooms, get the Midea U-shape. It's the quietest and the most efficient of the three, somewhere around $350 for the 8000, and you can still open your window with it. And if you've got a big room to cool, step up to the LG 14000, the LW1517i VSM. That's around $500, and you can run it off a normal outlet. But before you buy any of them, do the two things that matter more than which brand you pick. Size it to your room, length times width times 20, and round up to the next real size. And don't buy bigger than you need, because an oversized unit runs cold and clammy and wears itself out. Get the right size, and any one of these three will keep you comfortable. Whatever you land on, the links are down in the description. If you buy through them, it helps the channel a little bit, and it costs you nothing to extra. And if you want that video on the window heat pumps, the ones that heat and cool both, say so in the comments, and I'll pull it together. That's all for now. I'm Chip with Harper Knowles, and I am out.